Hey, how you doing there, guys? Another new week, another new video, and actually, I got a really great question comment from Shane Bolin, and appreciate that. It made me think. I'm like, actually, that's a real good question. It makes a very good topic. Shane Bolin says, I know this question might sound controversial, but do you think that Canon should backport some of the newer features that they're including in their latest firmware for the newer DSLR models to previous models? I happen to own a Canon 100D refresh, and here in Ireland it sells from 400 to 600 euros. I know there's Magic Lantern, but that voids warranties, which is frustrating considering it's the same sensor in the 100D is being used in, I guess, the newer camera. Now, first, I want to talk real quick about Magic Lantern. Now, keep in mind, from what I understand, Magic Lantern doesn't replace the Canon firmware. It's still there. It just simply, when you put it on the SD card or whatever media and turn the camera on, it boots and loads it into memory, so it actually gives you added features, obviously. Of course, that if Canon knew about it and you possibly damaged your camera because it could be overheating and other things because you're really pushing perhaps the camera to its limits, so it could possibly void the warranty. So I'm specifically going to focus on if, because he asked me, do you think they should take the newer firmware off these newer cameras and apply them to older cameras to give them new features or things like that? So I'm going to really think about it in two ways. As I'm going to think it from as a consumer standpoint and from a business standpoint. Now, as a consumer, I think it'd be great, for them to give features in older cameras to make the older cameras more relevant and be able to, continue using it. Even I'm not saying future proofing, but make it more, be able to use it for a longer period of time instead of maybe upgrading your camera. And I'll give you an example. I do have a Canon C100 that it has a 4K sensor, but only outputs 1080p. So I think it'd be great if Canon released a firmware update. Canon C100 allows you to record 4K. I think that'd be astounding. And unfortunately, I'm doubtful that's going to happen. And looking from a business standpoint, wouldn't make sense for Canon to cannibalize their higher tier cameras. Give an example, C300, C500, and so on. By doing that, because then it wouldn't, people like, well, I don't need the 300 because the Canon C100 now does 4K, so from a business standpoint, it doesn't make sense for Canon to do this, even though I think it'd be great to do so. Even though, my voice is going out here. Even though it's kind of restricted on the camera, give an example, Canon C100 only has 24 megabits per second and AVCHD, only 420 color space and 8 bits. Of course, a lot of times they'll give you an extra where you can actually extend the capability of a camera. For instance, I could get an external recorder and record in ProRes up to through the HDMI out port. It's uncompressed up to I can't remember the data rate. I think ProRes can go up to high quality, which I believe 220 megabits per second. So it actually can, and it uses exactly the same sensor as the C300, C500. So it actually extends the C100 capability. So they usually give you something where you can still gain added functionality at a cost, higher cost, and kind of workarounds. It'd be great to have a better codec built into the camera already, like MXF, or even if it had that, I'd be good to go. I've got MXF in my Canon XF100 example, and also you can output in 422 color space. It's still limited to it as an 8-bit camera, however, even though it's a lot of external recorders are 10 bits. Now, the only reasons I see Canon upgrading their firmware for older cameras, and is to support their other lines. Give an example, of course, Canon lenses. With the EF, you have over 70 camera lenses available. So often they update their firmware to allow support for their lenses. Additionally, with the Canon C100 and some of the other lines, now supports their Canon Cinema line, including their Cinema Zoom lenses. Give an example, their external remote LANC connection, and of course, this is in excess of $1,000 just for that remote. Too expensive for me for just the remote. Too much money. Obviously, this would be good for Canon, because then you might buy some other Canon lenses or what have you. Or I'll give an example with the Canon did update some of their XF Pro camcorders to make it BBC compliant. Give an example, the XF 100 and 105 and the XF 300 to 305 series. They added 1440 by 1080p at 35 megabits per second, which is one of the requirements to be BBC compliant, to be able to put it on, which is very popular with broadcast TV and news. So especially the BBC there in the UK. And then I believe you have to have a minimum of 50 megabits per second. So that might mean by doing so, more people would buy their camera for that reason, because they need a BBC compliant camera. So it makes sense for them to update the firmware. So I don't see them really doing it, even though it makes many consumers happy, such as myself. Just giving an example. Great questions, by the way. Appreciate it. Till then, we'll get one more video coming up this week. So thanks for stopping by, and see you later.